Hi, I'm Amelia from the account Ever Since 16 and today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 3 tips when it comes to mental health. I run an Instagram account called Ever Since 16 and I basically share my mental health journey, my mental health tips, and have managed to create a wonderful community of over 1,000 people now, which is insane. It's a great space to know that you're not alone and you can find friends there that go through similar things. It's amazing and I absolutely love it. So without further ado, I'm going to share with you my tips. Number 1 is burnout. It's definitely something to be aware of and be able to recognise, especially during exam years in secondary school. So between sort of year 9 and year 11 is where it's at its peak. If you don't know what burnout is, it's essentially when you overwork yourself so much that you make yourself ill or you just drain all the energy out of you. Personally, especially being the class of 2020, I really overworked myself. I was warned a lot by teachers about burnout. I think they could probably tell I'd be one that suffered because I just overly worked too hard. It's so important to take breaks and I can't stress that enough. For me, I hated taking breaks because I felt like when I was taking breaks I felt a bit guilty, I felt like I wasn't doing enough work, but trust me, it is so important. Something that I find myself always saying, especially on Instagram, is the way I see the mind, and I think that really helps. So if you imagine sort of a laptop, it has so many windows and so many tabs open. The more tabs open, the more there is to process and sort of get through. The computer runs slower, it buffers, it takes forever to load. That's sort of like the mind. If you think sort of about every thought, every worry being a file or a tab, it makes your mind run a lot slower. So my biggest tip is honestly to talk to someone, whether that's a friend, family, teacher, whoever, even the family dog. It makes a difference getting it out of the head and just actually speaking to someone. I know I personally spoke to teachers and family and it is so helpful. It's like a huge weight off of your shoulder, and sometimes talking to people you realise you're not alone and everyone feels the same, and that does help in that situation. But it really does feel like closing tabs on a laptop, and it's amazing how easy you can think and process things when you've let those worries go or you've spoken about them. Even if they're tiny little things, it's always worth bringing up and talking about with someone because it honestly makes the world's difference. Tip number 2 is 100% to find a hobby. Obviously, like I've just said, it is so important to recognise your worries and talk about them and bring your mind's attention to them, but it's also really important to have a takeaway from something. So if you spend a lot of time at school or doing schoolwork, having a hobby is literally just something to look forward to at the end of the day rather than the repetitiveness of being at home. I know personally at the moment it feels like I move from my bed to my desk and I just constantly toss and turn between those places, and it can get quite overwhelming and it can get quite upsetting at times when you just feel a bit trapped. One of my favourite things to do is a paint by numbers. You can get them on Amazon or Etsy if you're looking for something a bit more personal. I received one for Christmas and my birthday last year, and I cannot tell you how much time it passes. They do take quite a while to finish, however I think I finished mine in just under a week because they're so addictive. I could sit there for hours and hours and hours and not even realise. It's great at the end of the day to just wind down, especially being away from your phone, whether you play music in the background or just sit in silence or listen to a podcast. It's so good to just take away from everything that's going on. Another hobby I do as well is obviously my Instagram, with writing captions and creating posts and keeping up with people and making stories, and that for me is such a huge thing. Instagram can take up a lot of time if I'm planning or if I'm taking pictures or writing captions, but that is what I love. If you enjoy something, class that as your hobby because it's great. I know sometimes I draw as well. It honestly depends what mood I'm in, but definitely find a hobby that you can go to at the end of the day to just relax. They're great as well if you're feeling anxious. It's usually one of the first things I actually go to if I'm feeling anxious. I'll stop what I'm doing and I like to go do my painting or a bit of photo editing, etc, etc. But it's definitely worth investing in something. Another great hobby actually is baking. I find when I'm anxious I turned to baking, which has become a bit of a thing during lockdown, but also I've been doing it for quite a while. Whether you're good at baking or not, it is still so much fun, and obviously you get to eat them at the end, so it's a win-win. But I honestly recommend baking. Even if it's a packet mix, it's completely fine. Finally, tip number 3 is something I'm actually working on myself at the moment, which is breathing techniques. I love these because when you're feeling anxious, they're such a discreet thing to do. If you're around a group of people that don't necessarily know you're anxious, or you just feel a bit funny in a place that you are, you feel a bit uncomfortable, it works wonders. I usually tend to feel anxious when there's quite a lot of people around, which for me is why these breathing techniques are so nifty, because you can do them anywhere and you don't need anything other than yourself to do it. There are so many different techniques you can use. I know there's the 7-11 method where you breathe in for 7 and out for 11. There's also the 5-4-3-2-1 method where you sort of use your senses, so it's like 5 things you can smell and then touch, see, etc, etc. Concentrating on your breathing obviously calms you down, but it also keeps your mind occupied on something else for a while. Obviously, like I said, it is important to recognise your thoughts and talk about them, but sometimes it's not the right time, and in the moment you just need something else to move your head to. I've also recently started to struggle with sleeping, which is something quite new that sort of blossomed over the lockdown last summer. My dad basically told me a great tip, which is to think about something you usually wouldn't. I don't know if anyone else does this, but when I go to bed, that's my peak anxious time. My head starts to think about all these things, worrying about something. Maybe it's even something I said 6 years ago that I still remember now. It's really strange, but this tip really does work. And that is thinking about something you usually wouldn't. If you think about something that you wouldn't usually do, it almost confuses your mind. My dad taught me to sort of think about like my elbow or my shoulder. You would never go around day-to-day life thinking about those things. You don't walk around the shopping centre thinking about your knees. You don't walk around the house thinking about your ear. It's really, really random, but it works. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I hope I managed to help you all in some way, and make sure to take a break and look after yourself, because now more than ever that is so important, and hopefully I'll get to speak to some of you soon.